that great? I just sang right along with them. In fact, I think what's going to happen, David and Jim, is, yeah, just right in there. That's fine. They're going to invite us to join them on stage and sing with them sometime. And it'll be called Five Guys and a Bald Man. That's what it'll be. Oh, that is, isn't that great? And then to hear Brother Mark share, wasn't that good? You know, I got my Bible, I looked up that verse, Psalm 92:14. I love that.
That's good. That's
yes.
Good. Pastor Dave, can I just have Marcy come up here?
Sure.
When the children's director says she wants to make an announcement,
she can do anything she wants.
She can do anything she wants to do.
Okay, thanks. Today is the marketplace. We usually set up out here. But because of all the rain and the mud, we're going to set up in the Kingdom Kids Tabernacles. And anybody that's got items to sell, you can come and set up after 11:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. That's good.
Thank you. Anything else, Jim, you want to share?
I'm good.
You know what we ought to talk about, though?
What's
you
that?
talked about prayer-meeting, and I might have missed this, but tomorrow morning is a special prayer meeting.
Yes, that's good.
And can I lean into some of you tomorrow morning? Frankly, of all the services, that's my favorite service.
Yeah, me too.
To be here at 7 a.m. in the mornings. And if you don't, tomorrow morning is a special one. You might tell them about it.
Some of our students came and said, Pastor Jim, could we, they put it much better than this. Could we take over the prayer meeting for you? But no, they just wanted to offer their leadership. And they wanted to come lead some worship and be a part of it. And I said, why don't you just go ahead and lead it? And so Pastor Frank is our leader. And so some of our students are going to be leading. And there's going to be quite a few of them that are going to join in tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock.
Great. And I'd love to have you be here. They are not the church of tomorrow. They're the church of today. And I think it might make a statement if we would just support them en masse tomorrow. Well, God's good. He does good things. Hey, I shared this with you in the past, but let's just see if you remember this, okay? This one is kind of interesting. I'm going to see how alert you are. The sun's come out, so that should make you a little brighter today and alert. But did you hear about Dan? Did you hear about Dan? Dan's a single guy. He lived at home with his father, and he worked in the family business. And when he found out his father was going to inherit a fortune, when his sickly father died, when he found out he was going to inherit a fortune when his sickly father died, he decided he needed to find a wife with whom he could share this great fortune. So one evening at an investment meeting, he spotted the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Oh, my goodness. Her natural beauty took his breath away. She was a knockout. He went to her and said, I may look like just an ordinary guy, but in just a few years, my father will die, and I will inherit $200 million. Impressed, the woman asked for his business card, and 3 days later, she became his stepmother. Some of you aren't getting it. You're not getting it. Pretty sharp. Well, grab your Bibles. Let's go. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. We're going to just park right here again today. We were there Monday. Let's just go ahead and go right back to this verse. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. We're working on this whole theme of learning what it is to stand firm. To stand firm. So on your feet. Come on, up on your feet right now. Let's go. Let's just do this. I'm using the NIV. Let's just go through this one together. Are you ready? Some of you know this by heart. Some of us know it by heart, and then when we get in front of people, we miss a word or two. But let's go ahead and just say it together. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Therefore, my brothers, how are you to stand? You are to stand firm. How are you to stand? Firm. Then he says, let what move you? Nothing. What should move you? Nothing. Now, what does nothing include? It includes everything. Don't let anything move you from where you're at. And then he says, how should we give ourselves fully to the work of the Lord? Always. Say it again. Always. Now, let's go ahead and do it one more time. I want to get this into your DNA. We're running a race. And in this race, we have to make sure that we stand firm. So let's get this poured into our DNA. Are you ready? Here we go. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Okay, you can be seated. Now, as Paul is working with the church at Corinth, he understands that this place is a mess. In fact, if you go into 2 Corinthians, I do a lot of work with pastors. My heart is for pastors. I love pastors. I'm a local church guy. I do a lot of work out of 2 Corinthians because it is loaded with all these things of tension and stress. In 2 Corinthians, he says, who is equal to such a task? In our hearts, we felt the sentence of death. This thing became tough. It's hard. Chapter 1, we are distressed. In chapter 4, don't lose heart. Don't faint. He talks about all the things that are knocking people out, in a sense, dropping like flies. Now, the reason I get so passionate about this is we are living in a day and age where I am witnessing before my very eyes people drop like flies in their walk with the Lord. I mean, I'm seeing people fall away. The Bible says in the latter days, even the very elect shall be deceived. Now, what's that going to do to your theology? It talks in the book of Jude about those who have wandered astray. So I'm not here to create insecurity inside of you. I'm here to say, come on, this is going to get tough. This is going to get hard. This is going to get difficult. We need to make sure we stand firm. There's a fellow by the name of J. Robert Clinton, and I'm going to put a quote up on the screen. I want you to see this. This one kind of blew me away when I came across this. Let me read it to you. J. Robert Clinton, professor of leadership at Fuller Theological Seminary, has spent the past 15 years conducting extensive research on the lifelong development of Christian leaders. In an exhaustive study of the Bible, he identified approximately 1,000 leaders. Most were mentioned only by name. These included everything from Old Testament patriarchs, priests, military leaders, to New Testament apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers, and pastors. Sufficient information was available only on 49 prominent leaders to analyze how did they finish. The results are shocking. Only 30% of the leaders in the Bible finished well. 30%. This means that 70% fell short of God's plan for their lives, and this fact should jolt any present-day leader who desires to count for God. So if I'm teaching a class of leaders, I can take 10 of them, put them up on the stage, and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 down, 3 will stand. This is just the law of averages, a documented study of leaders. Those for whom you think would have the greatest chance of standing strong, only 30% finished well. Now, that's why I got all juiced up when Brother Mark stood up here and talked about, man, I may be 93, but I thought, man, I love this guy. That is what I want to be. Because there's something that happens that as we go through life, the propensity to finish less than we ought begins to rise. Now, we do this thing, and some of you have done this in business, that's called a SWOT analysis. Let me just kind of put this up on the screen so you can see it. A SWOT analysis is a technique oftentimes used in business where you analyze strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So as a business is going to develop and go forward, they'll simply say, where are we strong? Where are we weak? What are our opportunities? And what are our threats? That's why it's called SWOT, thus S-W-O-T. Now, if I could work with you and we were in a coffee shop somewhere, by the way, I don't drink much coffee. I'm a tea guy. I'm sissified as I like my tea rather than my coffee. Put my little finger up on my teacup. But if I'm sitting with you at a coffee shop somewhere, I would love to have this conversation. I'd love to sit down and say, let's talk about you. Let's talk about your strengths. Let's talk about your weaknesses. Let's talk about your opportunities. And let's talk about your threats. Now, what I want to do today is I want to prepare us by analyzing the threats. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So, therefore, my brothers, stand firm. What is it that could be a threat to my soul? Where is it that I could get off base? Where is it that I could fall? What is it that could knock me over? Now, I teach this out of a heart of angst, because I'm living in a reality of far too many people that are fallen. I'm a pastor of a local church. There's not a week go by that I don't deal with somebody that got caught in something, and it's like the enemy just took them out. And here's what we're beginning to notice. The propensity of this happening in the ministry is higher than it's ever been. I now am alarmed and alerted and motivated to care for my own soul, because there's nothing more the enemy wants to do than to take me out. He wants to take me out. He wants to take David Gallimore out. He wants David Gallimore to finish as a casualty. And the enemy has a master plan to knock him out. He wants to take Jim Keller out. He wants to take everyone, and those who, the higher you go in leadership, the bigger the target you're going to have on you. And the hosts of hell are going to come with everything they can to take you out. Now, we're not going to operate in fear. We're not going to operate in paranoia, but we're going to operate in wisdom and strength. And so what I would like to do is to have you join me in doing kind of what we call a threat analysis. It was 3 years ago, we hired a firm to come into the church and help us do risk assessment. And the whole security thing in churches now, it's just all changed. We live in a different world. It's just goofy. I hate it. Schools now are basically lockdown zones, metal detectors going in. I hate this stuff, but what we discovered is there was sufficient threats that were upon the safety that we have to now do things differently. You fly on an airplane, oh my goodness. I mean, they just about strip you naked when you get on the plane, and you walk through this thing, and in fact, it was shortly after security started, Christy and I was speaking a Saturday night in St. Louis, and we had to catch the last flight. There used to be a flight from St. Louis to South Bend on American, and we had just gone through security. We just were going through security. We had about an hour and a half before the flight. Christy said, "What are you going to do?" Now, you're going to understand the punchline on this before you should, because when I grew up, I would see my dad on Saturday nights prepare for Sunday. And I had this thing on Saturday nights. The message is done by Thursday noon. But Saturday nights, I go. And a lot of times when the kids were young, I'd go out to the church, and they'd say, "Where are you going?" I'd say, "I'm going to go load my guns." So I'm going through security, and Christy says to me, "What are you going to do?" I'm preaching the next morning, so what did I say? "I'm going to go load my guns." That's not a good thing to say when you're going through security. I'm going to go load my guns. You see, these threats have changed everything now. So we're going to go ahead now, and what I want to do with you is I want to walk you through a threat analysis on your own life. You see, my goal when we leave Brown City is that you're going to be armored up, that you're going to be prepared, and you're going to be ready. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. Here's what I want to do. I want you to understand that every person faces an impending threat to their spiritual health. Every person, every one of you, faces an impending threat to your spiritual health. There is some point of vulnerability. Okay, let me just see if anybody can guess this one. January 28th, 1986. January 28th, 1986. Did you ever hear of a thing called the Space Shuttle Challenger? 73 seconds in the liftoff. This thing just exploded. Christy and I were actually in Hawaii when that happened. I finished speaking in a conference, and we'd gone down by Waikiki Beach, stayed in a hotel, got up that morning, and oh my goodness. 73 seconds after liftoff, the Space Shuttle Challenger blows up. Now, why did it blow up? Does anybody remember the little thing, what was it called, that was defective, that blew up this monstrosity in the air? What was it? It was the O-ring. You knew it. It was an O-ring. In all the millions upon millions of dollars and the amazing construction, there was one tiny little flaw that under pressure cracked and it blew up. Now, if that's the case, it seems to me that I want to go and say, God, would you do a deep work in my heart and expose any defective O-rings that might be there? 5 threats. Let's go. Let's take a look at them real quick. What I'm going to do is just share with you what I sense as a pastor leading a congregation and also working with leaders, 5 significant threats. And let me just kind of walk you through them. Number 1, the first threat that could cause us not to be able to stand firm to the end is what I'm going to simply call lack of discipline, lack of self-discipline. How disciplined are you in your life? How disciplined? It was actually Charles Lake that put me on to the whole concept of personal discipline, and when he talked about daily quiet times. In our movement, we call them TOGs, and it's kind of a common thing in our fellowship to talk about time alone with God. That phrase doesn't excite me as much as DQT, daily quiet time, because it's got DQ at the start of it. I like it better. But TOG is this thing where you're going to be able to learn what it is to every day spend time alone with God. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 says, train yourself to be godly. Train yourself to be godly. That doesn't sound right. The word for train in the original is the word that we get gym out of. We get the gymnasium. The whole idea of I've got to be disciplined. I've got to go into the gym. I've got to work myself out. Lack of self-discipline could well be the area where we're going to destruct because we have not kept our disciplines intact. I want to give you a little formula. Here's a little formula that I believe is the key to master any area of discipline. You can succeed in any area of discipline. And here it is. Let me see if I can write this out big enough that you can see it. RT plus T, for you mathematicians, you're going to love this, minus F equals S. RT plus T minus F equals S. Now, what does that say? That simply says that if I do the right things for a long enough period of time, I can't just do it once. If I do the right thing for a long enough period of time, and you understand mathematically, you have to put that in brackets to make this thing work. The mathematicians taught me this. But I have to learn what it is to go against my feelings. I can't let my feelings stop me from doing the right things over a long period of time. It is going to equal success. And this is going to be about this whole thing of self-discipline. RT plus T minus F equals S. Now this works in every area of your life. Every area of your life. I'm amazed at the number of Christians who have never learned self-discipline when it comes to their own personal finances. I had a consultant say to me one time, the reason people do not tithe and give the first tenth to the Lord is it is financially impossible for some people to tithe mathematically. Because they're so leveraged in debt that their 10% is not left. There was a podcast not long ago called The Vanishing American Tithe. And the Vanishing American Tithe was based on the fact that we live in a society today that is so debt burdened, so heavy in debt, that we cannot be obedient to God. Years ago, there was a fellow by the name of Dr. Dennis Wood. This was back in my first life. Before I moved to Indiana, I had a live call-in radio program on Sunday nights. It was commercially sponsored. We would be kind of soft evangelism, and we'd bring a variety of guests on. And I brought a guest on that night, and his name was Dr. Dennis Wood. And he was all on this thing of learning. He was kind of the Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was what his deal was. And at a commercial break, he said to me this question. He said, Dave, are you financially free? I didn't get it. Do I charge? What does he mean? Am I free? And I said, I don't understand what you're asking. He said, if God were to ask you right now to give $250, could you do it? If he were to ask you to give $500, could you do it? Man, I'm glad those commercials were short. Because I couldn't. I couldn't. Came through college with college debt. Not a lot, but a little bit of college debt. We didn't make big income, big wages. But frankly, the invention of credit cards were killing me. Because it became far too easy to move on to plastic. And we had gotten ourselves in a bit of a pickle financially where there was more bills than there were resources. And that night I decided something. That one of the great hindrances to my ministry could be if I never learned how to handle my own personal finances. I'll never forget the day I wrote the last check to a credit card company, and in the memo line, in capital letters, I wrote, paid in full. And I wanted to put forever. I'll never owe you a dime again, you dirty rascals, because you have captured me and you've made this far too easy. Now, I'm not going to get into a long conversation about debt. More churches I go to said, I believe it's wrong to borrow money in a church. And we had to face that issue in our church. What are we going to do? Is it right to have a debt or is it not right? I believe that you have to. There's two sides to that debate, and I'm not here to debate that question with you. We did, by the way, work through that in our congregation. We came up with a formula that we would never be in debt more than 7 years, and it could not affect ministry in any way, shape, or form. The last debt on a $7 million project was 22 months long. That's all it was, because we were so committed that we wanted to minimize that thing of being slave to it. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Now, what area of your life are you lacking self-discipline? One of the studies I love to do is to study the book of Proverbs. It is incredible. Proverbs is just loaded. Now, what I did with Proverbs is I took all the dominant themes and I rearranged the chapters and put the themes all together. And it's got all these themes, and all the themes tend to go back to discipline. Like you talk too much, you spend too much. All these themes are about learning what it is to be disciplined sexually in these areas. So threat number one that you're going to have to come to grips with in your own life is this whole thing of your self-discipline. How disciplined are you? How disciplined are you? Some of us speak before we think. The Bible says there's more hope for a fool than a man with a quick temper. Some are undisciplined when it comes in their emotions. One of the things I absolutely love was this isn't spiritual, this isn't chapter and verse. In fact, this is probably Covey, where he talked about this thing of SR, stimulus response. And he said animals work on a stimulus response basis. There's this thing that stimulates them, and so they respond. He said we are created as people who have this ability to put a box in there, and we can process and we can think. And we can simply say, give me some time to process that. We are not animals, stimulus response. You see, if you don't have self-discipline, you are going to at some point self-destruct. Let's not talk about self-discipline when it comes to food, okay? Let's go to the next point. Here we go. It is true. Let's go to the next one. Number 2. Self-discipline. Number 2, the second threat that can come to us is actually this thing of pride. This thing of pride. God, finish this verse for me, would you? God resisteth the proud, but gives grace to the... Yeah. Pride cometh before fall, and a haughty spirit before destruction. Destruction. Threat number 1 is the threat of lack of self-discipline. Threat number 2 is the threat of becoming prideful. God resisteth the proud. So if there's any pride in my life, if pride begins to sneak into my life in any way, shape, or form, I am going to begin to discover what it is to have God withdraw his presence from me. And he withdraws his presence from me, and he pulls back from me. I'm at risk. Pride is so insipid. It is so hidden. It is so difficult to find. Pride is always, it's easy to find pride in other people, but we cannot find it in ourselves. Pride is where we want to say, look at what I've done. Did you ever think about this? Did you ever think about Palm Sunday and the donkey on Palm Sunday? Could you imagine that donkey? Jesus is riding in on this donkey in Palm Sunday, and the donkey says to himself, man, I must really be something. All these people came out to see me. They're waving palm branches. That donkey starts to think, whoa, just for me they've come. Now, when I tell you that, you look and you say, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It wasn't the donkey they came to see Jesus. So in a sense, if we can begin to understand that we're just donkeys. We're just donkeys. That's all we are. And I'm not going to use a worse word than that. That's all we are. You know, I love the story of Balaam. And I love the story of that donkey. And I always look at it this way. If God spoke through a donkey, maybe there's a chance he can speak through me. You see, God has chosen the foolish of this world to shame the wise. He's chosen the weak to shame the strong. But there's always this tendency in the flesh to want to scrape off glory for ourselves. Glory for ourselves. Monday morning, just a number of years ago, probably, decades ago, one of the old leaders in the church called me up and he said, I'm so excited today, Pastor. I said, why? He said, this is the best day. Why? He said, I was at coffee this morning at the coffee shop, and I discovered that we had more in church Sunday than the Methodists had. Oh, I thought to myself, this isn't a contest. This is pride. Now, is there anything in your life that you would say, I'm starting to get prideful to? Because if you are starting down a road of pride, we can be proud of our kids, our grandkids. We can be proud of our church. We can be proud of our state. I'm proud to be called an American. But pride can reach a point where it becomes destructive. Saul was caught up in pride, and he had to knock David down so he could be raised up. One of the things you'll see that gives away you might have a prideful spirit is when you find yourself having to tear other people down so you look a little bit better in the poll. It's a threat to the soul. Let me give you a third one. Here's a third one. A third one is kind of an odd word. I'm going to use this word. It's the word fringing. It's the word fringing. Now, when we talk about fringing, we talk about people who have a propensity to want to live on the edge. And they want to see how close they can get without doing wrong, but live on a dangerous edge. Fringing is where we flirt with evil. Let me draw it to you this way, and I just ask the Lord to help me make this clear, because there's a danger as I teach on this, and let me kind of try to work you through this. Fringing is wanting to somehow see how close I can get to sin without sinning. How close I can get. So if I believe in a sense, handkerchiefs are amazing. If I believe in a sense that sin is here, I'm going to try to get right about here. Now, what you set up is a system of legalism that simply says it's not wrong as long as I don't cross this line. And I draw this little bit of a line, and I try to see how much I can flirt with the edge. And God says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Now, fringing is really interesting. Let me kind of share this. Maybe this will help us understand. When I was 16 years old, I discovered something about myself that was really hard to understand. It was, I went to the state fair. I think I might have been by myself. A friend might have been with me. I went to the state fair, and there were one of these games you play. I can't remember exactly. I think it was a shooting game or something. And you give them like $2, and you get a shot, and then if you get this, you get a certain prize. And there was a certain prize that I wanted. And you know those things are half-rigged, and I didn't realize it. And I got into this game, so deep, and it really wasn't a skill game. It was more of a chance game. I got into this so deep. I'm embarrassed to tell you this, because if you did the math today on the value of what I lost that night, you'd say, you are a fool. And I was. I lost $100. That's a lot of money back in that day. It's a lot of money today. And I walked away that night understanding that in my personality, I could have a compulsive personality disorder. I could have a propensity to gamble and to take the chance and to do it. That games of chance were not going to be something I should be involved with. I walked away that night with a deep conviction that I never could play any game of chance where money is going to be involved in any way. I can't do it. We were flying through Vegas a number of years ago with our family, and we just were changing planes in Vegas, and I didn't realize that when you go to Vegas in the airport, there are slot machines and quarter slots. And I remember looking at those slot machines, and I remembered back when I was 16 years old losing $100 that night, and I knew absolutely in my mind that I couldn't put one quarter in a slot machine because I could not trust myself to walk away on one quarter. I couldn't do it. Now, someone says to me, Dave, isn't that a bit petty and legalistic? Isn't that silly and stupid? I think it's incredibly wise because I know myself. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say if you've ever put a quarter in a slot machine or you put a quarter in a slot machine, you're wrong and you're going to hell. I'll tell you, just give me the quarter and I'll go to Dairy Queen and get a Kid Cone or something, just kidding. Now, here's what happens on fringing. We have a tendency to set certain things up as absolutes when in reality they are deep personal convictions. Now, for me, that is I'm not going to do it. I will not do it. I will not do it. We'll go on a cruise sometime, and I'll have to walk through the casino to go in there, and I find it kind of interesting. I don't know how to do this stuff, play blackjack and stuff. My mind is so weird, I can't play almost any card game because I just don't know how it works. I tried to learn Rook years ago, and I couldn't figure it out, and so I just gave up and quit. I just don't think right. But I had to draw this line because I didn't want to fringe and get close to it because I knew how destructive that was going to be to me. Now, it is wrong for me to draw my line for everybody in this room and say, Keller, don't you dare do that. And this is where we get in trouble in the church. We make our line everybody's line. Let me give you a good example. I went with a couple, I think it was Mike Livingston, who is superintendent out in California, and there was a number of us that had to fly. He's a pilot. He flew us to where we're going to speak at a conference. It was a little town somewhere, and we hadn't had any supper. It was in this little plane, 4 hours in the air, and we all were just dying of hunger. We get to this place, and I meet a friend there, and I say, man, we got to get something to eat. And they found this little dive. It was a redneck bar, David, and they found a redneck bar, and I'm thinking, you know what? I got to get me a hamburger. I've got to have some food. And historically, places like that, I guess, David tells me they have good food. I wouldn't know. Just kidding. So anyway, we're getting ready to walk into this place because I got to get food. I don't care what the place is. Do you have food for the famished? As we begin to walk in, one of my buddies, young guy that I remember when I was in student ministries, he was one of the students, looked at me and said, hey, I'll just wait in the car for you. I said, Bill, come on in. No, I'll just wait in the car. I said, Bill, just hang out with us. Walked over and I said, Bill, is there something wrong? He said, yeah, Dave. He said, I know myself. And I know myself well. And it's going to be best if I sit in the car. Because he said, God did something for me. And he never made me feel bad for what I did. But he stayed true to his fringe lines that he came into. We are witnessing today in ministry. And we're witnessing this across our country, moral failures that are just phenomenal. I mean, terrible, awful. In fact, just Monday, a whole new revelation came out on One nationally, and the New York Times did another expose on it. It's just like, oh man, I'm embarrassed for my tribe. That's why I try to teach the guys I work with, the old Billy Graham rule still works. Never put yourself alone in a position with a woman where you're indefensible. Don't do it. Do not do it. The Mike Pence rule, as they make fun of it in Washington, D.C., and they talk about how weird it is that he'll never be alone in a meeting with a woman where anything could be laid against him, any charge. And I simply say, it seems to me that's pretty wise. And I tell guys, I say, that's pretty wise because who knows? You may be as innocent as a dove and a charge can become against you and you have no defense whatsoever. None whatsoever. I know there's impossible situations. And I know there are tough times and there are exceptions to every rule. But why not build your self-defenses? Build your self-defenses. I constantly am asked questions about alcohol. It just comes up all the time. Everybody wants to talk to me about alcohol. Is it wrong to drink? Is it wrong to drink? And I tell them, talking to me about alcohol is like talking to my heart surgeon about Big Macs. Not a good idea. Because I'm the guy that mops up all the messes. I'm the guy that mops up the family that fell apart because of the abuse. And am I going to be legalistic on the thing? I'm not going to be legalistic on the thing. I'm not going to be goofy on the thing. But I'm for myself going to have some lines because I know myself. I know my personality. I know who I am. And I'm not going to take my convictions and make them your convictions. You see, there's a difference between absolutes, convictions, and preferences. Don't forget this. This is just free of charge. Absolutes are where the Bible clearly speaks. That's wrong. Convictions are where God tells me, Dave, you're not going to go there. Preferences are on things, take it or leave it. We may like it, we may not like it. And one of the problems in the church today is we get these three things all mixed up. And I make my conviction absolutes, and you make your preferences, your convictions to be my absolutes. And God says, just know what it is to be wise. And don't step into this thing of fringing. Don't step into this. Don't see how close to the line you can get. Early in pastoring, I was going with a group of men to a Kansas City Royals baseball game when we lived in Nebraska. And we were just a bunch of guys having fun. I was my early 20s, and we were all in our early 20s except one guy who was probably late 40s. He was really old in those days. And we were just having fun. And as we were just driving on the road, somebody told a joke that it might have been a little marginal. It was one of those jokes that you just, oh, man. And then I told a joke that was more marginal. And when we got the ball diamond, the older guy just pulled me aside and said, hey, Dave, that probably wasn't wise. That probably wasn't good. You know, he was dead right. I was starting to fringe in my humor. I was starting to move a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Dangerous. Let's go on. Let's go on. A couple more, and then we've got to go eat. Here we go. Number four. Number four is self-deception. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord because you know your labor in the Lord is not in vain. In our seminar, we talk about the fact never underestimate your capacity for low self-awareness. Never underestimate your capacity for low self-awareness. Never underestimate your capacity for low self-awareness. You are the easiest person to deceive. You'll deceive yourself. You can deceive yourself so easily. We don't see ourselves accurately. I had to meet a personal injury lawyer in a restaurant one time. It's just a tragic thing that happened in the church, and it was so complicated. And so a friend of mine arranged for me to meet a personal injury lawyer over breakfast. And so I get there, and I know this guy from his ads on TV. You know, when they see us, they run, you know. And so I thought, okay. So I come in, I'm at the table, the lawyer comes in, but my friend isn't there yet. And the personal injury lawyer, when he comes in and sits across the table from me, had a brand new shirt on, and that little sticker that said XL was right there in white on his shirt. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, do I tell him? Because he doesn't realize that he's got that sticker on. And so I just, you know, like if you're talking to someone and they got food stuck in their mustache or they got something there, you kind of want, are we at the point in our relationship where I can share this? You know, what do we do? And so he's got this silly sticker on there, and I just kind of look away from it and just kind of don't do it. And when my friend shows up who knows this guy well, first thing he does, he looks at him and says, hey, Bob, that sticker on your shirt, you might want to take that off. And the lawyer looked at me and he says, why didn't you tell me? And I said, well, we weren't there in our relationship yet. We hadn't gotten to that spot. You see, he didn't realize how he looked. Hey, can I just tell you this since it's us here? The pair of pants I wore last night, They were new. Hadn't worn them before. I'm getting ready to walk on stage. And one of the tech guys looks at me and says, you might want to pull that size sticker off your pants. I didn't know it. Never underestimate your capacity for low self-awareness. You do not see how you're coming off, and you can deceive yourself. You can deceive yourself. You have blindness to things. You have these blinders. Some of you know the fact that I've had a bunch of eye surgeries, 6 I think of them, and lost all my peripheral vision. I have no peripheral vision. I can't see to the sides very well. That's a whole story in itself. And you ought to see us when we go through O'Hare Airport. It is so funny. People are bouncing off of me because I can't see them coming. So Christy walks 2 steps ahead of me. I'm 2 steps behind, and I kind of turn this way. I have areas that I'm totally blind in. It's just credible. And you have areas that you are blind to. Now, because you have those blind spots, tough things are going to happen. One of our pastors a couple weeks ago shared this in a service. It's incredible. I asked him, can I have permission to share it? And he said, man, I'm honored. And I said, well, I'm going to steal it, so I'm going to give you credit. So here it goes. Years ago, there was a study of high school students who were asked about their leadership skills and how their skills compared to their classmates. Listen to this. 70% thought they were above average in leadership skills. 2% thought they were below average. Now, do you understand averages? 70% said they were above average, and 2% said they were below average. I guess that to be pretty typical, not only of high school students, but of people in general. We are all prone to give ourselves credit for skills and abilities that are important to us, whether it's true or not, and that is called self-deception, and it gets in the way of our ability to stand firm. Greg Ten Elsoff, in his book, I Told Me So, points out that the more important something is in someone's life, the more likely it is that the person will lie to themselves about it. Now just think about this. This will scrape you close to the heart. So if being wealthy is important in your group of friends, you are likely to lie about your level of wealth so as to fit in, because that's important to you. Authenticity is something that's getting much attention over the past years. Just be authentic, be genuine, be yourself. The more important that quality becomes in society, the more likely someone is to lie to him or herself about their level of authenticity. High value is placed upon tolerance in our culture. It is of such high value, people deceive themselves regularly as to how tolerant they really are. And we all do it. And if you think this doesn't apply to you, or you've never caught yourself in an accommodation for your weaknesses, I guarantee that you're deceiving yourself in this very moment. Jeremiah says the heart is deceitful above all things. Galatians 6:3 talks about the one who deceives himself into thinking he is something, which ironically diminishes his value. Peter is the master example of this. In Matthew 26, Peter does this thing where he totally deceived himself. Jesus said to Peter, this very night you'll fall away on account of me. And Peter's response was, even if everyone else falls away, Lord, I will not. Peter had a false impression of his level of his character. And what effect did this self-deception have on Peter? He viewed himself better as his peers. By implication, he became critical of his peers. They're not as strong as me. And he was unable to do what he needed to do because of this self-deception. He ended up hiding, crying, and worthless. Self-deception. Now, there is a cure for self-deception, and that is to get married. Works every time. Let me give you the last one. Here we go, the last one. This one is really starting now to hone in on me, and if you're here and you're over 50, 55, turn your hearing aid up. You need to hear this one. And that is bitterness. Bitterness. I talked about this the other night, or the other morning. I really do believe that in our heritage, we know, if you came out of a Brown City Camp heritage over the last 40 years, you understand a lot about the doctrine of holiness and entire sanctification. absolute surrender. One of our key verses in understanding holiness of heart is Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. It says, follow peace with all men and holiness, for without no one will see the Lord. And that's absolutely critical. Unfortunately, in our movement, we forgot that there's a 15th verse. And the 15th verse says, beware lest any root of bitterness spring up and thereby many be defiled. One of the things that happens as we age in life is we either become better or bitter. We either become better or bitter. Sometimes, now I'm going to talk pastor talk for a second. I know you're not pastors, but I think this will pertain to where you're at. Are you acquainted with all the things that are happening now on football with concussions? This thing has just gone, I mean, it's unbelievable what we're seeing. And now it's moving into soccer where they're studying the number of, if you use your head in soccer. My grandson plays high school soccer, and I always kind of wonder, how many of those headers is he doing and what's happening on this. We understand that there is a cumulative effect of concussions that happen to people, and physiologically it can do brain damage. Dave Durson, who played for Notre Dame, Chicago Bears, classic case of point. Gail Sayers, who lives just over in Wakarusa, classic case of point, who now is facing some brain issues. And you see this all the time. Here's my theory. I am convinced as believers in Jesus Christ, I say this a lot to pastors, it is so easy to have ministry concussions or life concussions that do not damage your brain but damage your spirit. You've been wounded so many times, in so many ways, in so many situations, that your spirit can be damaged. I might have been in the seminar we talked about this. I don't think we did this here, so if I'm repeating myself, I didn't play football, and I didn't have a concussion from football, so I'm just having a little memory lapse. I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was, it was. It was in our seminar, so seminar people, forgive me on this. I love 1 Thessalonians 5, 23 and 24. It says, may the God who makes everything holy and whole make you holy and whole and put you together, body, soul, and spirit. And what he does is, Paul writes the church at Thessalonica and says, you have a body, you have a soul, and you have a spirit. And I'm not going to get into the whole dichotomy, trichotomy. We're not going to slice this thing real fine. But here's what he says. May the God who makes everything holy and whole put you together, make you whole, body, soul, and spirit, and keep you fit for the coming of our Master Jesus Christ. The one who called you is completely dependable. If he said, he'll do it. Now here's what happens, and this is what catches us as we age. A lot of times we have spirit wounds that we just get hurt. People say things, do things, kids, grandkids, neighbors, pastors, churches. Churches have hurt tons of people. Some of you have hurts that happened from a pastor who said something to you that wounded you deeply. You have hurts, you have father hurts and wounds. And what it does is it impacts your spirit. Now here's the way this little gig works. Is body, soul, and spirit are so interconnected, they catch each other's diseases. It's like sitting on an airplane. Did you brush your teeth this morning, David? It's like sitting on an airplane. When you sit on an airplane and you see people around you sneezing and coughing and wheezing and doing everything else, you say to yourself, oh man, I want to get there. Oh, what am I going to get? When Jim went to India with me, when we go to India on these long flights and sanitary conditions begin to deteriorate, you think to yourself, oh, what am I going to get? I've often thought about wearing masks, and I've seen these things you can get that are little hoods to protect yourself from it because you don't want to get the diseases. Well, here's what happens. In life, our spirit gets hurt. Gets wounded. Some of you have wounds from a spouse, from a child, from a job you were unjustly terminated from. And those wounds, you cannot isolate them out so they stay just in your spirit. They can begin to affect your body. None of these diseases. S.I. McMillan back in the 60s wrote the book on that, how you can get illnesses and sicknesses from those wounds. But it also can affect your soul. Beware lest any root of bitterness spring up and thereby many are hurt. And the soul begins to take it. So I want to close with a very simple thought. God, would you do a deep work inside of my heart so that as I age and as I move into the next spot in life, that I am going to be able to quickly forgive and not let hurts and wounds take root in my soul. The first time I think I was ever here, I think Tim Elmore was doing student ministries. Tim is just a legendary communicator. I mean, he's just phenomenal. And Tim preached on the Friday night of Brown City Camp, probably 95 maybe. He preached a message from Philippians that is a classic. It's actually a classic message in the African American church. It's a classic message. And Paul writes, it says, so what are you going to do with your hurts? Are you going to curse them? Are you going to nurse them? Are you going to rehearse them? And then Tim came to the end of the message and said, are you going to reverse them by the healing power of God to do deep work within you? And may the God who makes everything holy and whole make you holy and whole and put you together with a healthy body, a healthy spirit, and a healthy soul. On your feet. Stand up right now. Let's get that verse back up on the screen. Are you ready? Here we go. Let's get the verse up on the screen. Ready to go? I want you to get your outside voices. We're going to send you out of here in just a moment. Are you ready? Outside voices, that means big voices. None of this timid stuff. Ready? Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know your labor in the Lord is not in vain. How should you stand? Firm. How should you stand? Firm. What is going to move you? Nothing. And you're going to give yourself to the Lord fully and always. Amen. Let me pray for you before we break and we dismiss you. Father God, thank you for your love and your goodness, your faithfulness. Thank you for the way you work. Father, I think perhaps even this morning you just kind of moved around this room and tapped a few people on the shoulder and said, uh-oh, I got some stuff that's kind of sitting there that could well make me to be a casualty. Father God, when I read that Clinton quote, it just knocks me off my feet. The odds are not good. God, I want to be able to have my last lap be my best lap. I want, when I cross the finish line, I want him to say, well, there's no black marks on that guy. God, I pray for each of my friends here. I think of those who may have spirit wounds. Out of nowhere, something comes and just kind of sits right there on the back of their mind and says, oh man, there's some residue that's going to have to be taken care of. Take just a moment before we break and pray a simple prayer. Lord, may I see myself as you see me, and help me to be holy and whole. And now unto him who is able to keep you from falling and to present you before his throne with exceeding joy, to the only wise God our Savior be glory, majesty, dominion, and power, both now and forever. And all God's people together said, amen. No, you did it wrong. And all God's people together said, let's eat. Let's eat. God bless you. As you